really cool you reaching out to be on the show. That made me feel good. Where are you, Maryland? Is that what I read?
I'm living in Richmond, Virginia right now.
Oh, gotcha. Gotcha. What do you think about Virginia? Where are you from originally?
I am originally from Maryland. I live in Southern Maryland originally. Well, I grew up in DC for the first 14 years, and then I moved to a place called Calvert County. And then maybe about 2 years ago, I moved down to Richmond.
Okay. I was born in Bethesda, the Naval Hospital there in
Okay,
'76.
yeah, I'm familiar with Bethesda. I did SPX there a couple of times.
Oh, so you're a vet?
Yeah, I definitely. I think they had it at the Holiday Inn down there. So yeah, I'm pretty familiar with Bethesda and a couple, and well, most of the DC Metro and Baltimore area. I've got at least a basic understanding of how it works.
Well, SPX is a con, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
small press expo, and I did it once as well, I did it twice as an attendee back in the late '90s, and then once as a creator in the early 2000s.
I love cons. I mean, I wish I could spend every single day just walking around, talking to people, make money that way. Wouldn't that be great as business? And then I'm looking at your website and I see that's kind of like what you do, isn't it? You go around to various cons all the time. You're a con guy.
Well, yeah, I definitely, although I kind of want to move away from that, especially, well, I think a couple of years ago, I mean, I do like cons, I do like interacting with people, but I think a lot of people think, and I think this also goes to my line of work too, I do comics as my living. I do comics and artistic endeavors as my living.
I was just reading, what was I reading? You have one that is actually you going, the character goes to cons. Where am I? I've lost my browser.
Oh, don't worry about it.
What's it called? Slow Day.
Yeah.
Oh, Booth Space. Booth Space. I like your art, man. I like the tones too. Like,
yeah, that's done with the black and white stuff I did with ink wash.
Okay, so this is done on paper.
Yeah,
it's done physically. Interesting.
I think everything, although with the new project Chicken, I started doing digital coloring. I'm a slow adapter to new technology, so I kind of gone with. I'm kind of an analog boy that way.
When did you get started? Are you one of those guys like myself who had it only analog and slowly noticed the digital world encroaching?
I slowly adapted. I mean, I started professionally, like going to shows and selling my books and promoting my wares in, I believe, October of 2002. My first con was Baltimore Comic-Con at the convention center there. And this marks my 18th year in the business.
You've seen it change.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, I think maybe, what, 3 different changes over the last 18 years.
Yeah.
Indies emerge and then corporations take over again, right?
I would say the big changes were I would say the first big change was, I guess, the incorporation. I mean, I was there for the incorporation of like more both the internet and digital work becoming the prevalent use of medium as opposed to paper and pen and physical tools. I mean, I guess I'm in a hybrid state. I still prefer to do my pencils and inks through paper, and for no other reason, because it gives me something I can set up on my table when people go up to, like, a common thing artists hate being asked over and over again, hey, is that your art? It's like, no, I acquired this booth through conquest and took all.
Oh, I'm guilty of that. That's like my first question, because I go to New York Comic Con and there's just booth guys and girls everywhere, right? You're not sure if you're actually talking to the person or somebody they hired to stand on their place on Sunday because I was too poor to buy the Saturday main event tickets or something along those lines.
Yeah, I get it, but like, yeah, also at the same time, you're asked that question probably like
1,000
30,
times,
40 times a day. And then after a while, it's like, you're wearing a name tag, you're wearing, you have a big, like, I literally have a banner behind me that says, hey, look, it's Dan Nokes with an illustration of myself. I'm usually at the show and they still ask me, like, is this your art? It's like, does it say Dan Nokes all over? It's like, yeah, well, that's me.
I mean, why do you want to get away from the con environment? Because, I mean, personally, it is very claustrophobic. It gets so bad. Have you been to New York Comic Con? The
I did
big
New
deal.
York Con twice, and I had been to Big Apple Con last year.
Okay.
And, I definitely, I think my big reason is after a while, like it's, how do I equate this? It's a job I love doing, but it's still a job. And also the fact, I mean, on top of that, it's when you go and you set up a physical location, you're spending money on a booth, you're spending money on transportation, you're spending money on lodging, you're spending money on
Food.
food, on miscellaneous expenses.
Yeah, totally.
So you figure that against the profits you take in, that cuts into your overall revenue. Now,
Yeah.
if I do this at home, you know, my home office space, it's decidedly less over. We'll go and do that versus going to a show.
So interesting. So what are you doing in your home office space? That's equating to cons. Can you do that? Is there a market out there you can invade?
There are ways to get it done. I mean, basically, it's A, promoting your online store, and B, trying to set yourself up as doing commissions and sketches and project work, trying to get people to, like, you know, bring you on board as a writer, bring you on board as an artist, bring you on board as a colorist, flatter, inker, whatever kind of job you can set yourself up for. And then that work tends to help supplement me getting, you know, more books for selling online, or books and prints and stuff like that to take to shows, you know, et cetera, and so on.
Are you putting into the equation this pandemic, the COVID situation that we're currently facing, as your decision why you're not going to cons?
Like I said,
Ruling it out in the whole decision-making process.
It's definitely factored in. I think it's, like I said, I kind of wanted to at least, I don't want to quit cons altogether, but I want to, I think on top of the reasons, I also say you tend to get burnouts. Like I said, there have been years where I've done, I want to say between 40 and 50 shows a year. And it literally turned to that song, Turn the Page by Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because we are going to have to turn the page, at least for the next few years, I think. Like, even if you don't want to do cons, I don't think cons are going to be able to be done by us for X. You know what I mean? It might not, it's definitely not happen this year.
Yeah, no.
And next year it looks like it's going to start getting canceled too.
I think definitely, I think this year, if I do, I think I hit about 5 shows so far this year, and 4 of them happened before COVID, and 1 was a stealth show. So I've literally done, you know, like I said, I've been on the road single weekends a year, and I think the ones, 2 of the shows I did were local. So basically, I've traveled very little and interacted with the public very little in the last 7 months of the year. But I do see COVID affecting things, at least for the next, until the end of the year, but yeah, possibly going into next year.
Yeah.
I guess it's all depends on how it's all handled in the next 6 to 8 months.
Man, I mean, I'm not obviously a virologist, but it looks like it's being handled very poorly in various places around the country. Florida, Texas, and then they're going to start it all over again, probably. Yeah, numbers are pretty crazy. I don't know. I mean, and I appreciate where you're coming from. 7 months out of the con business, I don't think you had much of a choice. There's not much that you could have planned for. Things started shutting down almost immediately.
I did. Right? I mean, yeah, I did an estimate. I think 15 shows so far that I was planning to do have been canceled from mid-March to now.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and like I said, that's yeah. Conservatively, I've missed out on several $1,000s worth of revenue. Now I've managed to counter that, at least keep myself afloat. I mean, and I'm sure a lot of other artists and creators are doing the same exact thing. by going,
Trying to,
yeah,
right?
trying to push their online store, trying to push their services. I mean, a lot of artists have day jobs somewhere else, so it's the matter of like it still hurts. It's a loss of supplemental income, but it's not. But for me, it's like I want to say, given any given year, my my con revenue counts for somewhere between anywhere as little as 50 as much as 90% of my.
That's absolutely insane to lose. I mean, I don't know how you're coping. That's got to be devastating, right? I mean, as an artist, the business side of things is already painful for me anyway. I don't know how you feel about it, but if you've managed to make a living off of something and it just disappears and you don't know if it's going to come back.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, I've forced myself to adapt. I mean, like I said, I'm definitely trying to search out new means. I'm trying to adapt. I'm trying to make my plan, my originally slow and gradual plan to lean off of shows as being my primary source onto more like passive stuff, say like an Etsy store for selling T-shirts or whatever of my art.
I've heard Discord's a great place if you can figure out a way to show people how you do your stuff.
Oh, okay.
Right? I mean, like, people love to watch things being painted, talking through processes, how you're doing this thing. I mean, ink washes, that's interesting. I don't know how to do it. I would love to be able to draw like this. You know what I mean? That's to be able to consistently draw characters panel to panel. That's not a normal thing that people can do, right? So I don't know.
Well, I think there's a certain innate talent, or I don't know if it's innate talent or innate drive. Probably a combination of the two. But I think a lot of people ask me a lot about how, like, well, like, I'll never be this good. It's like, and I'll ask them, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a carpenter. It's like, well, I could be as good as you are if I had
20 years, 40 years. Right?
Yeah, if I had whatever time it took you to be as good as it is.
If I stopped doing this and started doing that in 20 years, I'd probably be as good as you.
Yes.
I mean, really just devote yourself to whatever it is you're really good at. And that guy's a carpenter, and you write these things too, though.
Yeah, I pretty much I write, I pencil, I ink, I color, letter, and publish every 21st Century Sand Shark Studios book that's out on market.
The question that occurred to me while you were talking is how this is going to affect your storytelling going forward. You've obviously fallen into a certain niche with what you were doing already that might have to change. Have you considered that in terms of how you're going to be starting to plot these things and draw them out?
Well, right now it's like I'm finished with the chicken story. That was my current book that I just got. I did a Kickstarter for it, and it's just hitting market now.
Is it on your website? I'm gonna look at it. I'm curious what the chicken story is.
Yeah, I'll go into the details in just a moment. But back to your previous question. I kind of write long form anyway, so it's kind of like I try to put everything out in a one-stop shop graphic novel or trade paperback, which means basically I'm not going like issue by issue anymore. I used to sell books issue by issue, but I found out it's selling the first issue is easy, but the longer you go, the harder it is to sell those issues. So I kind of like went from that to doing straight out graphic novels, and then very limited series that go immediately.
What an interesting journey to get to that decision, because I really don't want to buy book by book. You know, I want the whole story right in my hand as a reader. I just discovered comics just recently, so this is something I've just recently discovered. Waiting month after month is irritating.
Yeah, no,
then things disappear. I'm like, dude, what happened to Saga? We're supposed to be every month, and they're like on a hiatus. What's happening?
Yeah,
so
it's I think we're living in the age of Netflix and binging shows.
Yeah.
So
it's harder on us though, isn't it? Because you really just can't produce that serial content. You really have to pony up the big boy, the big graphic novel. How many pages is Chicken USDA?
Chicken's 104, which is the small, like it's a full color book too. It's my first full color comic story. I've been doing black and white for the last like 18 years or so. I've done what was this, like the 6th or 7th book that I've put out.
Is this also in color? I'm not color. I'm sorry. This is digitally colored. Did you just say?
Yeah, I digitally colored chicken.
Okay. What did you use? Did you Photoshop? What did you use to colorize?
I had an old Photoshop CS2 program that I colored everything with.
That's it, man. That's the thing. Photoshop is the way to go with everything, isn't it? They have the corner. It's you had an old copy of it. Now they charge so much a month. It's like painful to love them. You know, it's like just painful.
Well, the copy that I got, Adobe was offering PS2 for free legal download like 8-9 years ago, because basically so many people had illegally downloaded it that it was like there's no point in, and it was such an old program by that point. It's like, here, you can just have it for free, but you know, do it now while we have it up here. So I said, all right, I'll take it. A friend of mine gave me their copy of Photoshop PS5 or CS5 now, which is a more current version. But yeah, I'm glad for that. I just have to go. I just got it recently, so I just have to download some new brushes to go along with it.
What kind of hardware do you actually use to input? Do you use a tablet or?
I have a little. My old roommate, Indy Martin, gave me a little bamboo Wacom bamboo tablet.
Wacom, right? That's the best. Yeah. That's horrible. It's another. I think aren't they Canadian as well? These Canadian companies that know this graphic stuff just really get you. So expensive, so painfully expensive.
Well, the tablet I had wasn't too expensive.
Oh no.
But if you want to get into like the pro stuff, the serious pro stuff, yeah, I can get like the Cintiqs, the ones that are like you can directly draw onto the screen and it appears there. Those are way more expensive. I think like the beat up old secondhand copies are going for like $900 to $1,100, and I think like the good stuff's going between $2,000 and $5,000, $2,000.
Yeah, grand, exactly. They're crazy. They were at New York Comic Con and they had me thirsting for one. I wanted one real bad.
Yeah, I don't blame you. You and me both.
Yeah. So I mean, this is all hand drawn and then graphically colored.
Yes. Yeah. I have a 11 by 17 flatbed scanner at home. And I use that to scan all my stuff in. And once it's scanned in, I clean it up on Photoshop, get rid of the excess pencil marks.
Congratulations on the 71 backers too, man. That's impressive. Did you go through Kickstarter or did you go through the other one? Whatever.
I go through Kickstarter for my stuff. There's good things about the best thing about Indiegogo is they have a flex pay system, so where it's like with Kickstarter, it's all or nothing. If you either make the amount you set for yourself or you don't get anything. Indiegogo's best virtue is that you have flex and then you have fixed. You have fixed, it's the same rules as Kickstarter. If you go flex, you can still get some money, but there's a higher percentage if you get, like, I think it's like 4% if you hit your goal and 9% if you don't meet your goal or something to that effect, which is, like I think that's their greatest strength. But Kickstarter is more widely known, and I find that I did some projects on Indiegogo and I did some projects on Kickstarter. I find in general I was able to get more and better funding through Kickstarter than Indiegogo.
What my research showed me was that you're bringing people with you to Kickstarter to fund you there, right? Is that what happened, or are you getting people on Kickstarter to fund you there?
I think that I have a good enough fan base that follows me through with any project I do, but it's nice to also have friends and friends of friends that will go and plug stuff for you. Like I rely heavily on like social media and people that follow me on social media to like go, like take whatever thing I post on Facebook. I'm not a big fan of Twitter, but like Instagram or whatever social media I have, and they're like, here, share this for me, and they'll share it to somebody and give me a nice plug and maybe lead to 2 or 3 more backers towards my cause.
That's fascinating. So you don't like Twitter and Instagram?
I like Instagram. I don't like Twitter.
Why not?
I guess the limitation of characters. I guess it kind of promotes.
Oh, okay. That's actually why I like it. I enjoy the idea of brevity. I'm like, oh, damn it. I'm too long-winded. Gotta cut some stuff.
Yeah, I guess I grew up, I was a teenager during the 90s with like guys like Spike Lee, Kevin Smith, Tarantino movies where everything was kind of verbose and things were kind of based on, a lot of the dialogue was based on a sort of a verbose delivery of lines. So I kind of, I appreciate a place to let me be long-winded. Twitter, on top of that, the brevity has kind of resulted in this sort of, I guess, internet abbreviations. And I know language changes. I definitely know the English language is a very mongrel language that is altered over time. And maybe
I like this. Somebody said fluid lexicon of word usage. I mean, that's English, right? It forever changes. Yeah. On the times. It's just so beautiful.
People, a lot of people think it's something very rigid. It's like, yeah, the English language it's never met a word it doesn't have a fascination with and doesn't try to incorporate in some ways.
Exactly.
But the internet, when I have to sit there and read somebody that uses like starts instead of Y-O-R-U-E R-E with your, it's just U-R, and I'm like if I have to sit there and.
But you know what? As far as like you're a visual artist though, and I actually think Twitter works for people like you better than people like me, who have to use the 240 characters or whatever. I don't know, what is it, 240 now? 240 characters to make somebody interested. You can right away show me a picture, and that's your verb. I mean, that is strength on those platforms, and you know it as well on Instagram anyway. That's the same kind of language, right? That visual.
Yeah, I guess, and maybe it's a part that I haven't quite cracked the code with Twitter versus like Facebook. I've managed to crack the code, but it relies on my strength of my artistic ability and my verboseness. Although I think Instagram is more towards the visual representation of things, because I think people are literally just scanning through Instagram looking at pictures rather than reading any captions there. Because I'm definitely guilty of that. I was like, okay.
So that's always what I would think when I look at Instagram. I'm like, how can I put my words up there? And people don't want words on Instagram. They want that visual splash, whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
So as somebody who came into it at 2002, you're not talking about Facebook, right? 2007 is the advent of that. You get those first kind of accounts, and then things go from there, and the world is completely different from there on out. So 2002, for 5 years, what are you doing that's gathering steam for people recognizing your name and your work?
Definitely hitting the show circuit.
That was it, right?
And that was it back then. It's like hitting the show circuit. God, I had a primitive website by comparison and around that period. I want to say my first foray into social media was 2000. I want to say MySpace was around in maybe like 2006 or so. I want to say like 2006 because that's the year I did San Diego, I think.
Cool.
So yeah, no, it was basically going show to show, much like an indie band, an indie alternative band from the 1980s or early 90s had to do. It's just literally going out on tour, except that, it's not as cool in the visuals as it is being in a rock band.
Is it dead? Do you think it's dead? Do you think it's ever going to come back? I mean, I'm listening to you talk, and I realize that what I just saw last year, the last time with the NYCC, it was huge. There was no walking space. I had to cooperate with the people around me. I felt like I was in a mosh pit the entire time. It's gigantic, right? That's people voluntarily showed up to that kind of mess. But when you were going in 2002, there was no mess, was there? There was a lot more calm.
It was still around. It was still, how do I put this? It was still like, I would say probably like the way alternative music was in 1989, 1990 versus when like Nirvana broke in 91. It was still insular. It was still had like, if I went to Baltimore, there were still like I would say a good, 5 to 10,000 people, probably more than 10,000 people going at that show. And I went to shows that had anywhere between, several hundred at a small show to like, 5 figures before things started to break. And back to your original question, do I think it'll come back? I've seen the comic industry, and I've seen the con circuit have its lack of its shrinking periods before. I mean, I went through the collapse of '96 as a comic book fan, and I went through the financial crash of 2007, 2008 as a creator. And I've seen it happen at least twice before. I think people want to interact with each other on a one-to-one basis. I think they want something that's communal and interacting with each other. It might take a while. It might be a matter of months. It might be a matter of, I want to say the crash of the '90s took us like 5 to 7 years to recover, and I think it took a good 4 years to recover from the 2007, 2008 crash. I wanted to say things didn't really kick back to pre-2007 figures till about 2012 for me.
Okay, so you can actually see this on paper for yourself how it was working out. Yeah, that's fascinating. It's going to be interesting, right? I mean, going forward, what is going to happen? I'm looking at 4 or 5 years, right? I think that's when things are going to they'll look totally different. People who were going con to con, they're supporting themselves, aren't going to have that kind of fat to keep going. Maybe, I don't know. Can the cons keep going? I'm in New York, so I mean, I'm watching these places that you think are, cemented into the establishment go belly up. Like Modell's is a sporting place. It's no longer a thing. They're just closing shops all over the place. Places that corner stores are just disappearing. So maybe the cons themselves are just going to start saying, "Wow, we can't do this. We were barely meeting a profit margin every single year. They're just going to start folding away."
Well, I saw, like I said, with the second instance you were talking about, I was talking about the 2000, 2007, 2008. I saw a lot of cons go, but it's like I said, around 2011 or 2012, a lot of the big within that, like 2007 to 2011, I saw a lot of big cons go out of business or get bought up by giant mega shows, like I guess Wizard was at the time. But then I saw what had happened is a vacuum was created, and in that vacuum, something else took its place. I would say roughly around 2010 or 2011, you saw a lot of local mini shows come in and take its place. Like I saw plays like the big shows in town that would come to town, like I would say like a New York or Philadelphia or Los Angeles. A lot of those dried up, but in their place, like smaller towns that were having trouble getting from people that had a strong local population, but neither could afford nor had the ability to get to 50, 60, 70, 100 miles from where they lived to these big shows, but they wanted those shows. Local promoters sprang up and just said, "Hey, let's do something on a smaller scale. Let's do something that maybe houses like anywhere between 100 to 1,000 people, and see how it goes." And I think that a lot of those shows that sprung up then led to one example.
It's so fascinating. It's so fascinating. I'm listening to Sparkle of like a San Diego or New York Comic Con is creating these smaller places. The option to have Comic Cons, basically.
Yeah,
motivating them to do it.
A lot of people get say your Repop shows, which New York Comic Con comes from, or San Diego, or up until recently your Wizard World shows, like the ones that are charging anywhere between
$70 a ticket.
Anywhere between $30 to $100 a day to get in, or whatever it is. A lot of people can't afford to do that, but let's say you live in.
They have the same challenges you do, right? They have the lodging, they have the travel, they have the food. I mean, it's expensive in New York. You're just not coming for a $40 a day. It's you're spending like $100 or whatever on a hotel.
And that affects your small press and independent creators such as myself too, because a lot of these guys that are coming in, they've already, before they've gotten to the door, have spent anywhere between 2 and 4 figures to get to the door. So they're going to be of limited means to drop money in the first place. And, you know, I'm not saying this the following to sound bitter or cynical, but I am nobody, or next to nobody's first stop at a convention. I tell people that independent creators are the impulse buy at the end of the checkout counter at the grocery store. That they're going, like they've gone and they hit like all the big booths. They got their celebrity signings. They've hit all the other stuff, and now they're just kind of wandering through. And they finally stopped at your booth, like, oh, what are you about? And then you have, I guess, anywhere between 15 and 45 seconds of their attention to try and wrangle them in for a sale.
Yeah, it's tough, right? I like that side of the Comic-Con. I like those booths that have the guy that's doing his own thing. I love talking to him, stopping and finding out what he's doing. Obviously, you know, I enjoyed it. I did a podcast and got you guys to come on and talk to me. But I avoid I avoid the corporate situations. I hate them so much. They're just not filled with any creators. You go up to them and you say, "Is this your stuff?" And they go, "No, it's not. I got hired for $15 an hour to stand here and look bored." You know, that's what you get in the big corporate places. I like going up to you guys and having that conversation, but I also show up like at first in the morning and I leave when it gets really crowded.
Yeah, I think it's,
I mean, you don't cater to me though, because chances are I can't buy from everybody and I'm interested in everybody. So you really want the guys who are coming in after the corporate deals and are excited and they're manic and they're like, "Oh, I got 20 bucks left. I'm going to just throw it anywhere."
yeah, like I said, I'm rarely, except, you know, like at certain shows, like if I'm at a hometown show or if I'm at a place where I go to multiple times and built up a local clientele in that area, I kind of have to sit there and fight for every inch of ground that I get. So it's basically, and a lot of artists and creators, especially the ones like myself that are actually making their own comics and making their own, you know, cartoons or creative efforts. The last thing that they want to be is a salesperson.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's like, I guess it's the same thing
like
as again, to compare it to a band. The last thing a band wants to go and do is peddle their merch and their records. They want to go there. They want to perform. They maybe want to say hi to a few people, and they want to leave. They want to sit there at a booth like, "Here, buy our T-shirts, buy our whatever." Like, 'cause I think there's this stigma.
I mean, think about it. You're Michael Jackson, and you got to call yourself the king of pop and take it serious, and not, you know, you can't be condescending about it. I'm the king of pop, guys, and you have to be serious.
Yeah.
Take yourself seriously enough to believe it.
Again, I go back to the adage of it's a job I love, but it's still a job.
Yeah.
So it's my, well, I say it's my career. It's a career that I love to do.
So what is the part of it that you love the most? Like you are what is the name of the publishing company? My website.
21st Century Sandchart Studios.
You're everything.
Yeah, it's a one-man band operation.
What's your favorite part? What's the part that you look forward to every day?
I guess my favorite part is when people ask me what it is that I am, I say I'm a storyteller that happens to have some artistic ability. I love telling stories, and I'm able to use my art and drawing skills in order to bring them to life. And I do, like, you know, I'll do some fan art for people, and I like I like fan art to a certain degree. But when I sell one of my books, when I sell one of my creator-owned properties out there, and when somebody reads it and somebody writes back, "I love this story. Do you have anything else? What is your up to next?" That's probably the most satisfying bit of the job is putting out my stories and people appreciating those stories.
Yeah, I understand that. Absolutely. Finding that connection between the storytelling and the reading or the engagement. There's so many parts and pieces that go along with that too. Do you hire an editor or anything that work on your stuff at the end of the day?
I have my last book I did, I had literally my girlfriend who is definitely more accomplished. Like I'll go firsthand to say, like, My grammar and syntax definitely need some work by the time I'm done. Like, and it's you could be the best. You got the best developed English lit skills in the world, and you'll still probably wind up making mistakes.
Yeah, forget about it. Forget about it. I'm not the best at grammar, and no matter what, I just take 1,000 passes on things. There's still mistakes. It's crazy. Yeah.
Punctuation is my Achilles heel, so I'll say that right here and now.
The small details, they always slip past. I mean, forget about it. Everybody makes mistakes. That's why they have professional editors. That's the unfortunate thing. People like us, we're competing with these guys. That's all they have to do all day is look at the mistakes.
Yeah.
Who are picked specifically for the personality of the person that wants to look for mistakes and find them. They don't want to create anything. They want to find mistakes. I mean, we can't compete with that.
Yeah,
your girlfriend. My wife is the same person as your girlfriend. She's constantly reading my stuff for mistakes. She just can't find it. No matter how educated or smart she is, she just can't find them all. It's so sad and frustrating.
Yeah.
So I mean, storytelling and connecting with that audience, and I mean, I hate that looking at the future is so uncertain for cons and for creators like yourself, indies. I mean, who knows what's going to happen going forward? And I did ask the question, how is it impacting the art itself? Like, do you find yourself creating things differently now, thinking about, I mean, 100 years ago, there was a Spanish flu, it was a pandemic. Hasn't happened a lot since then. You know, this is new, historic stuff. Is it influencing the kind of art that you're producing?
I can't, right now, no, but I can see it down the line affecting how maybe a potential story somewhere down the line from now. But,
are you a one project at a time guy? Like, are you working on something right now that's been in the stages of completion for X number of months or whatever?
Well, I just literally put chicken out on the market. So I'm focusing on getting rewards out to my my backers and finishing off some stuff.
Oh, interesting.
And then I'm kind of I've set August aside to start brainstorming a couple of new projects. The one that I'm self-publishing, it will be my first prose book.
Oh, good for you.
All prose with maybe some chapter illustrations, but that's about it.
Are you going for an age range?
What now? Yeah, it's probably going to be towards PG-13 to adult. I'm looking at doing like a historical comedy that I'm selling as Seinfeld meets the Dark Ages.
Neat. I like it. I like it a lot. So, I mean, that's a great mixed medium too. The prose and the splash art, I guess you would call it, the chapter art or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that's in development. You don't know when it's going to be released.
It's in the very, very, very early stages, which is basically, like I said, August. I'll probably sit down and do an outline and a character and plot Bible, and then from there I'll probably sit down and start writing chapters, like a first draft. I figure this is probably going to be like a more long-term project. I don't know. It depends on how the organic flow goes out, because this is like the first time. How do I say it? With the comics, I kind of approach it more from a Jack Kirby type of perspective. I just
What's that? What I know Jack Kirby, but how is his perspective?
Well, Kirby tended to approach a lot of his stuff was that he had a loose plot or idea, and
that was Stan Lee, wasn't it? That's how he kind of went about it. Well, this is what I kind of want. Go ahead and do it.
Yeah, well, the way I was told the Marvel method works is Stan Lee came in with anywhere from a loose outline to maybe some sort of basic page breakdown, but he left it mostly for the artist to come in and say, like, all right, panel 1, I'm going to do this. Panel 2, I'm going to do this. I come in with a basic plot in my head. But this is when Kirby was working on his own, too. It's like he'd come in with a basic plot in his head and do all the pages, and then go back and do the narration, do the dialogue. The art comes, well, the plot comes first, then the art, and then after that, the narration and dialogue.
And so the prose, being the first prose story that you're actually going to put into publication, do you write these things as short stories before you even start doing the art at all? It doesn't even sound like that even makes it.
I guess with the comics, they were like I said, I do what's known as like a character Bible, which is basically breakdowns of the characters and then an outline of the story from start to finish. And then from that, I would go and I do the art. And then basically with each page, it's like, all right, I have to start here at point A and I have to get here to point B. How many panels do I need and what do I need in each panel? But the important thing being is I'm starting from point A in panel 1 and I'm ending at whatever number of panels it takes me to get to point B. 5, 6, 7, or 3 panels or whatever it takes.
Gotcha. It sounds like the prose book is going to be like a swimmer trying to learn how to do a marathon.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's definitely. It's me. I tend to think of it more as somebody that's adept at one sport trying to learn a new sport. So it's definitely a new set of rules. I'm not going to have. I definitely won't have the pictures to sit there and back me up. It's no longer a show don't tell type of thing. It's basically everything breaks down to my ability for descriptives and narration to guide somebody on the story on how to get from together.
What did it to you? What made you motivated to go in that direction? Prose.
I think I just wanted to try something different. I wanted to try again. I'm a huge history buff, and I had done a Western so many years ago in comic form, but I kind of wanted to. Kind of wanted to parody historical like a history like a history book like the way that say the philosophers of old and the history tellers of old used to put together. But I kind of want to turn it into a comedy.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel comics could. I felt it needed something like that needed to be more prose than adapting itself to a comic book.
Yeah, it's frustrating, isn't it? When you feel like something's in your soul that needs to come out a certain way. I feel like that. I feel like there's a comic book in me too that I just can't draw. I want to so badly. And like I said long ago in this conversation, I just don't have the consistency. I don't have the ability to draw the same thing over and over again. And I'm looking at your work, and I mean, that's what you're doing, right? You have consistency throughout. You have a character, and that character you can recognize in every single box. It's a powerful skill. It's a powerful skill.
That's what pushes a lot of people, people who are trying to break in. I think I always tell people, and there are people that disagree with me, that I say that interior art is 100 times more difficult to do than cover work. I think the people that argue cover work is more difficult say, well, I put way more detail or effort, or there's more color work that I do on a cover than it is interiors. But for me, it's overcoming repetition, the drags of repetition. It's like, okay, you can draw Superman flying through the sky in a dramatic pose, or you can draw your main character from your book looking super cool, but can you have them sitting there in their apartment at 3 o'clock in the morning watching TV and eating Ben and Jerry's? Can you have a character on all these different situations over and over again and make it interesting and maintain that drive? And if you, I would say a large amount of people can. It's like a lot of people can't move past that. Like, I just want to do the pinup and the covers thing into like sequential art. So I always tend to think sequential art is way more difficult.
I would agree. The way you're describing it, I would agree. I mean, the little details within those little boxes are very important. They provide depth, right? They provide not just the main character, but other characters too, movement and action and what's happening. They have to move the plot along. I mean, you could do a bad job at that. Not you, but people do a bad job at that. It really affects the reading. I mean, it's mathematical when you have a comic book.
Yeah,
It's like that in prose too. I mean, honestly, if you break down a paragraph of a really well-written story, there's a lot going on there to push you along, grab onto you, and whatever the nut of that story is, have it grow branches into your subconscious and make sure you get to the end. I mean, that's a good story. A bad story will push you out in the first sentence. You know what I mean? You'll never be able to get into it because it's broken. There's nothing growing.
People who tell stories that, one of the first things, I guess I was in middle school, is like I was taught, like, whatever you do, don't wind up repeating the same words over and over again. The only time that works is like if you're in a courtroom scene or something like that. But otherwise, like, you get like, then the dog went to the store and picked up, and or, you know, but basically, where just it all kind of bleeds into itself and doesn't have any flow to it. It's basically, I think that's one of the first things that I learned is how flow of language works and how it helps with narration.
Did you study story beyond just general education?
I've always considered myself self-taught, sort of in the
What were your go-tos? Like, what would you recommend people pick up and read or study to learn story?
Well, I definitely, from the comic book end, I think the absolute best book is Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud.
Yeah, man, that book's expensive right now too. If you own a copy of it, it's just getting more and more expensive.
I think they might. Well, I think there's some copies out there that are like maybe 15 or 20 bucks. So
yeah, I mean that's extraordinary for a book. Usually they're priced around 10. So I mean, people I agree. People go to that when they say that it's one of the best books on the market if you want to learn how to storytell in comics. Like, it breaks down why comics work, right? It's like just perfect like that.
Well, it's also in comic book form. So not only is it teaching you how it works, but it's teaching you how it works by actually doing what it's supposed to do, which is it's making a comic. It's instructing you how comics work in comic book form. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, you can take points away as to not only how it works, but why it works. I think that's what a lot of what's the one guy's name? Somebody ends with a heart, or HART, and he does this, like, how to draw powerful comic book figures or how to draw comic book women. And it's like, I think that those books are kind of like they're fine, but they don't teach you the mechanics. They don't teach you the mechanics and the physics of why, not only how, but why something works. And it doesn't really teach you the storytelling or sequential elements.
This is very important. I mean, as a prose author myself, I cannot get into your art because I do not know how the nuts and bolts work. When I read a comic book, it's like a mystic thing that's happening. The story just kind of washes over me, which is how you know it's a good story. I mean, if you read, like, what's that story that came out of Iran? You know it.
Perpectives?
Yeah. The way she does it is so simple, right? She's not really trying to blow you away with the art, but it sucks you in and pulls you along, and somehow this story just washes over you.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for, like a really passive experience when I read a comic book. I don't want to work too hard.
Yeah. There's I was telling you about Small Press Expo. I went there as a fan in 2000, and I went to a panel, and it would be the guest on the panel. The guy that was Will Eisner, and he was being interviewed by Jeff Smith, who did Bone. And I went there. I think I went to see Eisner for the same reason. I went to see the Rolling Stones to say I had the bragging rights of saying I saw Will Eisner.
Yeah, greatness before it flashes away, right? When did he die? Will Eisner.
2006, 2007, I believe it was.
I got it for like 5 years before he died. But yeah, he's one of those names, right? Now you say Will Eisner, it's like, boom, okay. You see his signature. You see his work. I mean, yeah, it's interesting. So what?
But what happened was, like, I was fully going in there, like, the guy was 83 at the time, and I was fully expecting the guy to be like, back in my day, we used to go and carve out bamboo from a tree and make our own pens and kill an octopus for ink. And it didn't wind up like that. It wound up, this guy knew where comics had been, where it was now, and where it was going. And he kind of sat down at one point and was saying, like, all right, I tend to see comics as one of two families, and one of them are these are comic artists, and one of these two groups. One are the guys that do these beautifully anatomically perfect, well sculpted, well proportioned characters, but they're stiff and they don't tell a story. And the second one are these guys like your Art Spiegelmans with Mouse and like Persepolis and all that. The art is not necessarily the most realistic and
so human, just so human.
Yeah, but it makes the point of a well-told story. And
it makes an interesting point as to what reality is. When I was a kid, I loved Calvin and Hobbes. Like, we had all the collections of Calvin and Hobbes, and there was this one panel in particular, and it was just Calvin looking over the shoulder of his father. It was just very, very simple, and it used to crack me up in relationship to the 3 panels or the 2 panels before it. You know what I mean? If you get it right, it works so damn well, and it carries itself. There's momentum to it.
Yeah, Watterson's art is probably one of the most kinetic art styles I've seen out there.
Totally. He's a genius. Too bad he's gone. Why do you think he took off? Why do you think he's no longer in the industry? Is it just about the corporate nature of it, or do you think there's more to it?
Some people I think some people value their privacy. Some people, I think the creation grew beyond his grasp to a certain degree, and some people just don't want to interact with the public. I mean, I can do it. I consider myself a introvert that can fake being an extrovert long enough to get done what they need to be done, and then kind of retreat back into their alcove to continue their introverted tendencies. But
I mean, could you do chicken for the rest of your life? Like, say chicken. I mean, you know, whatever you do, pray, wish, whatever takes off, and everybody reads it in the world, and they want more of it. You know, more and more chicken, more and more chicken. You have to produce chicken for the rest of your life. Is that something you're willing to do, or would that be a nightmare?
I don't think I could do it forever. There are people that have that long term. Like Dave Sim did Cerebus for 300 issues. There's some people that have aspired to do long form projects. Tom McFarlane did Spawn. I mean, even McFarlane dropped out of being like the main writer and artist for his book after a while. But I mean, like maybe Eric Larson on Savage Dragon. But I'm somebody that sees comics as a medium and not a genre. And the idea of doing, like when I first broke in, I did a superhero book. And when I was done with that superhero book, I was like, I don't want to do superheroes anymore. So I moved on to like a modern fantasy book. And then after that, I did a Western. And after that, I did a post-apocalyptic zombie book. And I feel like comics being a medium, it allows me to tell whatever story I feel like doing. And I only have a finite amount of time on this planet. It seems silly for me to just do the same thing over and over again, especially when it just becomes strictly about the money versus artistic growth, artistic and personal growth on a project.
It's interesting though, right? Because if you do become popular, let's say you're a J.K. Rowling and you produce a Harry Potter, or a Bill Watterson who produces a Calvin and Hobbes, people only want that stuff from you. They don't even want to look at any of your other contributions. She gets rejected for anything else she writes except Harry Potter stuff. You know what I mean? She's even like says horrible things about whatever group, and they get upset with her. But Harry Potter's still like untouchable. They're okay with Harry Potter. It's the author of the Harry Potter that goes away. You know what I mean? It's like, as an artist, that would be frustrating. They'll be get pigeonholed, I gather.
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, at the same time, look at guys like Stephen King is known for horror, but
Stephen King's like you, though. Stephen King writes whatever he wants to write. And
yes.
that's why we respect people like Stephen King, because I think his drum is all dented in by whatever beat he wants to beat it to.
Yeah.
Like that. We like people like you. That, and myself, I like to write different stories too. I don't want to get stuck. But I think the public wants to stick you. Once they get their claws in you, like Andy Weir is another great example. I love that guy's his work. But when Artemis came out, it was not the Mars book, and people were mad. You know what I mean? They only want the Mars book, but the Mars book is done. So Andy Weir's done, kind of in a way. But yeah, I mean, in terms of appeasing the public, in terms of like Bill Watterson's level of fame, I don't even know if that's even possible anymore, to tell you the absolute 100% truth. And if you do attain it, you're probably not going to attain it without the help of corporate, right? Indies aren't going to get to
I mean, I guess to a certain degree. Who knows? I might be one of those rarities. Like I might walk through the rest of my life being like a cult figure, like eventually a chief son, maybe some sort of John Waters type of status, to where I continue.
You're revered. You're an artist. People like your work because it appeals to them. It's not. You're not Michael Bay, right? I mean, Michael Bay.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know, man. I really like talking to you. I like your work too. I'm gonna wish you all the luck in the world with your release. When is Chicken coming out?
Oh, it's out now.
Oh, it is now. Okay.
Yeah, it's out now. It's available through my website. It's the first book you can also digitally download for those that are not looking to either have a paper book in stock or spend quite as much. We have a standard version that's available for 25 plus shipping, and then I have a what's known as a sketch cover variant, where the front is blank other than the logo, and then I can hand draw a
that's cool.
personalized cover on there. And then the
how much does that run?
That one, there's two different tier levels. The $30 level gets you the cover with a quick head sketch on there, or $60 will get you the fully done picture, like a nice like full color picture on there of Chicken doing something random and silly.
Where can people buy the stuff at?
It's at www.21sandchart.com. We have the Chicken book there. We have all my prints, all my past books, including the Paranormals, the Pistoleers, Adam and Eve, Bizarre Love Triangle, and the Zombie Apocalypse, and Impossible Space Tales, The Last Pit Stop.
Fantastic, man. And you're on Instagram. People can find you through your name?
Yes, they can find me through that. Or if you go to the website, it connects at the top of the homepage. It connects you with all my social media.
Anything that you think we missed? Anything you think we should have talked about that we didn't?
Well, I guess, no, I think we've covered just about everything. Like I said, the Chicken book's out now. The digital version is also available. We have sketchbook cover versions. Check out my other books, which are great. And give it a quick lowdown. Impossible Space Tales and the Last Pit Stop was my last book, which is basically what if Area 51 were a convenience store for aliens.
I like it.
Yes, and Adam and Eve, Bizarre Love Triangle, and the Zombie Apocalypse is about a guy running around on a talking Segway with his dog looking for the woman of his dreams will only be pursued by his zombie ex-girlfriend.
Why not? That's fantastic, man. I'm loving these stories. I really am.
And then Paranormals is my my fantasy book, or modern fantasy book, which is sort of like a deconstructionist take on various fantasy tropes, various mythology tropes. And then Pistoleers is sort of my take on the Western.
I'm jealous, though, because it almost feels like it's easier for you to tell the stories that you want because you're a great artist. Yeah. Like, I'd like to tell all these stories myself, but it would take me a year to write a novel or, an actual...
It also helps, as you were saying earlier, since I'm not, quote-unquote, big... The expectations are less, since I'm not big and famous to do what I want. Nobody's going to say, why aren't you doing another book on this? Because there's nobody... the fandom is not big enough to where people are just going like, just do this over and over again for the rest of your life. So I do have the freedom to go and do what I want when I want.
Yeah, I like it. And that's the indie model. And I mean, we just have to see what happens. It's interesting. I think we're going to be in a different world going forward. It's not going to be the same one anyway.
No, it never is the same. Again, I've been doing this for almost 2 decades now, and it's definitely a different, it's changed 3 or 4 times since.
Yeah, I would say, I think you've gone through at least 2 epochs. One being the Facebook thing, which launched, or Amazon too at that same time frame, launching independent careers, making it possible for you to make money, distribute materials, marketing, talk to people, engage on the internet, never leave your house. And then what happened after that? What would be the big one? Again, corporate kind of taking things back a little bit, right? They took those cons back. That's just fascinating.
And again, I think if I have enough wits and I have enough cleverness and if I have enough heart and drive, I like to think I'll survive this as well. Knock on wood.
Oh, you'll survive. I mean, just you're everything's gonna look different at the end of it, hopefully, right? And you will notice. You won't notice. You're just trying to survive. Yeah, that's the best part about it. Anyway, man, what?
And my fans have been pretty, support. Like I said, the last 4 months, my friends and fans have come. I like to thank them right now for going out of their way to support me through commission work, but through buying my books and help getting the word out there on social media.
Yeah, I mean that must be amazing having that type of support. Anything else that you think we should mention?
I think that's about it, other than a quick shout out to the other project that I worked on, which is the Teddy Bear Tales with Nick Davis. He does a series of children's books about a teddy bear named Tristan who fights monsters under the bed.
That's another book that you've developed, or you're developing with somebody else?
Nick Davis is the publisher and writer. I was the principal artist on the first 3 books that he did. So I did the design. I was the chief designer of a large swath of the characters.
If somebody came to you and said you could be one or the other, writer or artist, which would you pick?
Probably writer. I love my art, but if it comes down to I have to do one to survive, the writer still allows me to accomplish my primary function as a storyteller.